just the lab. It's a really great space. Started it, is that okay? Yeah, it's a really good spot.
Ready or not? Here we go. Good afternoon. I'm Steve Miles. I'm a professor of music at New College, and I also direct New Music New College, which we are celebrating its 20th anniversary season this year. I never missed a chance to beg for the applause on that, by the way, so thank you for applying. This is a very special afternoon event for us. We have been pleased this year to begin partnering with the Hermitage Arts Retreat in what we're referring to as Hermitage at New College. And it's really very much a natural pairing. The Hermitage, as you know, has brought in some of the finest artists in the country in so many different media. And New College is very much a center for the curious, the curious learners. We combine two different traditions in the liberal arts. On the one hand, we are the honors college of the state university system, and we are very proud to do that. All of our students write senior theses, or have a senior project, so it's very academically rigorous, but we're also part of the experimental tradition in liberal arts. We do not use grades, we use narrative evaluations, and our students are encouraged from the very beginning to experiment and to take on independent projects. So partnering with the Hermitage is great, and we're so thrilled to have International Contemporary Ensemble with us today. So at this point, I am going to turn it over to Patricia Caswell.
Thank you. So I am Patricia Caswell. I am the co-founder and the program director of the Hermitage Artist Retreat. The Hermitage Artist Retreat brings artists and composers and writers for 6 weeks to 5 historic beach cottages on the beach looking out over the Gulf of Mexico. They work there for 6 weeks, and we have had 8 Pulitzer Prize winners writing and working there. And of course a bunch of other winners like Emmy, Tony, Grammy, and more. And we're happy to share this high level of artistry with all of the people of Sarasota, and especially with those at New College. And speaking of awards, today you'll hear from the International Contemporary Ensemble, and I want to tell you a couple of awards that its founder, Claire Chase, has gotten. She is a MacArthur Genius. She won the MacArthur Genius Award. She won the Avery Fisher Prize, given by Lincoln Center. Her name graces the walls of Lincoln Center, along with Yo-Yo Ma, Emanuel Axe, Joshua Bell, and many others. And there's just one more thing. This is being live streamed. And I know there is one viewer sitting on her sofa named Jerry Aaron. We dedicate today's music to Jerry Aaron for her 20 years of love and loyalty to the Hermitage Artist Retreat. We wish she could be with us, but hi, Jerry, and thank you. And now, Claire is going to introduce us to the rest of her group. Night 4? We're just going to play some music. I have to get rid of the microphone. Oh, we can put it on. Ron told me to put it on. Nonsense. No.
pleasure to be here with you all. And thank you, Steve and Ron and all of the amazing people in the college, and Patricia and Bruce and Jerry on the live stream. We love you, Jerry. It's been, I mean, privilege, honor, joy. The words don't, we need poets to come up with better words, and we'll hear from those poets today to describe what the experience is of being at the Hermitage and having uninterrupted time and space, imagination space, dream space. It really is just, it's such an experience. And to be able to share it with some of my favorite people this week has been a really special joy. So thank you for making all that possible. Our program this afternoon deals with words and music and the playful and elusive relationship between these two things. And I'm delighted to introduce my wonderful colleague, Suzanne Farren, composer and virtuoso Ondes Martenot player. You'll hear all about the Ondes Martenot this afternoon. The marvelous poet, Laura Mullen, who's been here with us all week. And we'll introduce you a little bit later to our executive director, Rebecca Siegel. Just wave, Rebecca. And of course, I'm Claire. It's so great to be with you. So that little piece was by our dear friend, Marcos Balter, composer, longtime friend of the ensemble. And it's called Alone. It's inspired by the Edgar Allan Poe poem of the same name. Anybody familiar with that poem? It begins, from childhood's hour, I have not been as others were, I have not seen as others saw. I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source, I have not taken my sorrow. I could not bring my heart to joy at the same tone. And all I loved alone. So in this piece, the same tone is a single sustained instrument. It could be any instrument. Sometimes we play it with a wine glass. It could be a violin. It could be a human voice. This was a special privilege today to play it with an Ondes Martenot. And the triangles are ambient and can be played by anybody. They were played today by the wonderful Laura Mullen and by our dear friends Larry and Eileen Dunn. Can you just wave, Larry and Eileen? So, speaking of the Ondes Martenot, do you want to tell us a little bit about this marvelous instrument, Susie?
I would be happy to. Thanks, Claire. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having us here. It's really a pleasure to be out of the, what is it, the Arctic vortex? What's going on? I don't know. Something's happening in New York with the weather. I'm not aware. So, yes, my name is Suzanne, and I'm a composer, and I'm also an ondiste. That's what you call a person who plays the Ondes Martenot. So the Ondes is a strange instrument. It was built in the mind of an engineer during the First World War. He was an electrical engineering student, and he was a cellist, and he was French. and he was drafted to work on the radio signals at the top of the Eiffel Tower. And this was during a pretty dark period in the war. He recalls to himself in one of his writings towards the end of his life that he was contemplating the shocking reality of our ability to make technology to kill other people, but our inability to make technology to make people's lives better. And so looking at the radio signal technology, which is what he was working on, he said he made a choice to himself. I'm either going to throw myself off this tower, or I'm going to make something beautiful out of this thing we've created. And so, obviously, he did not throw himself off the tower, thank goodness, and he created this, the Ondes Martenot, which had its premiere in 1928 at the Paris Opera. But it was really born in this dark period of wartime. So one of my great friends, an architect, made a very nice sort of summary of how the Ondes works. It looks like a keyboard instrument, but it actually operates like a cello, just like his cello. So you'll see me move as if I'm playing a glissandi, because I am. He made a string that you pull, you put it on your finger. It's called a ruban, you know, just the ribbon, and it's 2 spools, and the string moves up and down. And the technique of learning to play the instrument is to make you think that I'm cutting that string into notes. And that's what you heard me play just now in Marcos's piece. And then there's also another part of the instrument called a clavier, which is the keyboard. And this is an instrument that is analog and monophonic, so I can play only 1 note at a time. And anytime you think I'm playing more than 1 note, it's that I'm tricking you by doing something funny. Yeah. So my life as an Ondes takes 3 parts. And I try to think about this idea of the engineer wanting to save the world, the engineer wanting to make something that would wake people up and make them less violent and make them more expressive and more communicative directly with other people. And if he had not been killed in a motorcycle accident in the 1980s, he would have come up with his last version, which was only in his mind at the time, which was actually a helmet that the Ondes would wear. And I would just think the Bach, and I would just think it to you. But I don't have that, I have this. So the 3 parts of my programming for Ondes are the engineer's dream for the Ondes as an instrument of all instruments. It would be in every home. It should play all music that was ever written. So I play 19th century music. I play Rachmaninoff. I play lots of cello music for the Ondes, on the Ondes. And then what I think of as the French imagination that was just kind of coming out at this moment. So it's an instrument for composers, but who didn't know that instrument existed yet. So composers like Ravel, who apparently heard the first movement of his string quartet played on 4 Ondes Martenot and fell out of his chair and said, "That's how I heard the piece in my dreams." So that inspired my second part of programming. So I play pieces by Debussy and Ravel and other French things like that. And then, and also the actual French music that was written for Ondes, right? Messiaen, who is the composer that, if anybody knows anything of the Ondes in this audience, you will know the composer Messiaen, who wrote actual pieces for the Ondes. And then the third part is to imagine what is the future past's idea of this instrument. So I commissioned new works for the Ondes. And that's a great joy for me to be able to interpret other people's work. So I'm going to just share 1 dream with you today. And, well, actually 2. But the first one is this dream of the Ondes as an instrument that could interpret even the music that you already know. And so I will play a little Bach for you now.
to Suzanne play Bach on this instrument all day and all evening. It's such a...
You
It's,
kind of had to.
it's so wonderful, it's mesmerizing. You know, often at ICE, we refer to Bach as our favorite experimental composer. Because there's something about his music that always sounds fresh and new and weird and challenges us to listen more deeply and to think differently about music and its relationship to the world. So Bach has been, you know, of course, a source of inspiration for so many composers, and a composer that ICE has had a long association with. Her name is Du Yun. She was incidentally the first Asian American woman to win the Pulitzer Prize 2 years ago. She's a phenomenal, phenomenal woman, composer, multi-instrumentalist, and performance artist herself. She wrote a piece for me that sets a solo movement of Bach, the Sarabande in A minor, and asks the flutist to do something that the flute is not really used to doing. You know, like the Ondes Martenot, the instrument can really only play one note unless I trick you. And she asks the flutist in the last section of this piece to play little fragments of the Bach and to actually inhale with my voice a sort of ghosted fragment of what would be an ostinato, so creating the illusion of counterpoint. So the original Bach goes like this. And in Du Yun's setting of it, she has me go. She also asks me to sing and play at the same time so that I can create harmonies with myself. So this is a little fragment of a piece called An Empty Garlic. It's a funny name, right? An Empty Garlic. It's a poem by Rumi, a little-known poem by Rumi of the same name. And you know, we associate Rumi with sensuous love poetry and mysticism, and there's a lot of feel-good Rumi poems. So this is a pretty devastating Rumi poem until the very last stanza. So I'll just read it for you so you get a sense for what she's after musically and where the Bach might fit into that. So An Empty Garlic goes like this. You miss the garden because you're looking for a small fig from a random tree. You don't meet the beautiful woman. You're joking with an old crone. It makes me cry how she detains you, stinking-mouthed with 100 talons, putting her head over the roof's edge to call down, tasteless fig, fold over fold, empty as dry, rotten garlic. She has you by the belt, even though there's no milk and no flour inside her body. Death will open your eyes to what her face is, leather spine of a black lizard. No more advice. Let yourself be silently drawn by the stronger pull of what you really love.
I am ecstatic to be here and to be at the Hermitage, which is an extraordinary, incredibly magical place. I seem to have done about 3 weeks worth of work in 2 days, which, if that could just happen a lot, I'd be really, really glad. And to celebrate the joy of being on the stage with these amazing people who I adore, I thought I would do something, I thought I would do the adaptation. I collaborated with an artist on an artist's book, and it's this elegant little paper thing. And I realized I was going to be here, and I thought I could make it into a movie. So here we go. I'm just going to tell you briefly that my collaborator is the photographer John David O'Brien. And he lives in Los Angeles. He's received numerous public art commissions. He was the recipient of a California Community Foundation Artist Fellowship, a City of Los Angeles Artist Grant, and a Fulbright Research Grant. He currently teaches at Art Center College of Design. And this is our book called Verge. And Verge picks up, I would say, both on the loneliness that was evoked, especially by the poem, but also I would say it's about architecture, and it's about power and desire. And the architectural features that he chose to photograph are called Googies. And these are all from Los Angeles, which is where he lives and where I was born. And the Googies stand up out of whatever restaurant or other gas station occasionally that they mark. in order to let people know going past in their cars that this exists. And in a way I thought, wow, they're kind of like flowers calling out to the bees that we are, but they're also very much an architecture about power and desire, an architecture meant to entice desire, an architecture meant to exemplify power, to reward power, to celebrate power, specifically the power of the automobile, which is likely to be a limited power. So here goes one. I've never read it out loud. Meant to be seen as moving into, out of reach, that is, meant to be marked as only available for only an instant, that is retreating, being left behind, that is little piece of sky, isolated, seen in the rearview mirror, slipping away as the sign rises and disappears into that band of aqua across one edge of the windshield, gone long ago. Now that outdated way of cutting the light. Air to make negative space appear an opportunity. Reinvention of the reference to Finn's streamline. The dream was, is the speed at which love arrives, yeah, and dies. Clock this. A little bit over the limit, always baby. A layer of dirty brown gray here, held down above the whole dream, another element will. So each exaggerated swagger raised and shot. Said over and over, everything in excess, but aerodynamic, our progress, we're using it to lift off, we're using it up, celebrating this magic ability to get somewhere fast, to get away, even faster. By which logic we, away, by which logic we, away, by which logic we, fast, the ability collapsing history, by which logic we have already been everywhere, never sure we got anywhere, and too much is never enough. Star shapes. Spiky, reach up, invade, space, signal, a space, mark a brief stopping point, make an opening, indicate a meeting of desires, or what? The flow, the movement, away, here, away, until it becomes as easy as breathing, to want a part of a dead cow, finally ground, the thick, icy pour of white, proposing a future that never arrives. They remain markers of a past that can never be the past. See, we have enough to burn, to light up the sky, to say, stop, here, you want to more than enough. The sky they try to interrupt, each. This sky they try to interrupt, each. This sky they try to interrupt, each hard, sharp oasis inside of which the good time happens, ghosts go on, having that good time. Deferring, displacing, the cause. Who were we? Cruel innocence. Bodies made of meat and milk, heads of a single glowing thought. Stop, don't stop. Step, spikes. Tell a story. Signals seem to advise us. A word for an extension, a kind of promise, an invitation, flung into the air and still there, toward or away. Toward, away. Freedom from all I want is just a place to. Jaggedness, repetition, but exact, as if recorded sections cut into the flat. Attention is got. These sharp edges are kind of mopping up. Piecemeal removal, residue crafted into that first proposal completely fails to account for collateral jaggedness, repetition exact as if recorded. Despair is, will be, was, byproduct. What a cheerful mess. Our visions, always, never, abandon. You should see the other guy. Replacement is the essential gesture. As if in a dream, the figure you seek is in every figure, more or less. The steadiness of desire is desire itself, not desire for. The focus is on what it is that's moving into or out of vision, not the frame of the gaze, desire, which stays there. World is a world. Was broken. remains. And now this amazing thing, which has never happened before. I'm so excited about it. Suzanne Farron has set a poem from my book subject, a poem called Empty. I'm going to read it. They're going to play music. This is not just a premiere. This is like there's no rehearsals. So this is the first time anyone has ever heard this. And when you're ready, empty. Huge crystalline cylinders emerge from the water. The future. Where do they come from, the king gushes, these talking fish? Show me at once. We see the writer buried under a collapsing mountain of scribbled over papers. White ink blurts from an overturned bottle. Speech is silver, the king mutters. Silence is. They discovered a fabulous ancient city. Black Lake, flag of smoke, where we turn to look. Skulls, bats, stars, spirals, lightning bolts, words spoken in anger, flowers for sarcasm. The sequence continues to work in references to the brevity of life. Increasingly faint, trace of inked, flowers, delicate. After that, cat, catch, a decree. Eradicate.
vintage, drinking wine at night. That was so fun, Laura. So, do you want to say something about this, dear?
Sure. Should I use my teacher voice?
Use your teacher voice.
I can use my teacher voice for this too. So the next piece is a piece I wrote for Claire and I. It was Claire's brilliant idea to combine the on, which lives in this world of glissandi, with the glissandi flute head joint. So you want to show that? Yes.
All my wildest dreams. I could be a trombone. I could be a violin.
We need to get that on the bass flute.
That's right.
Oh my god.
On that.
Yeah, let's do it. So Claire knew that I would be excited, and I continually am excited about this thing. So we made a piece together, and it was a real labor of love. And we realized last night as we were remembering it together, because Claire plays it a lot, but with me in a speaker, not in this setting live, that the pieces also functioned a bit as a letter between us, which I really love. We started together, and then we went apart. Claire goes on her wild tours over the whole universe, and she kind of carries me with her. And then I try to remember her again when I come fill the role of myself. And it's a nice kind of remembering, and it was inspired by a poem, not a poem actually, a letter by Emily Dickinson to her sister-in-law, Sue. And maybe some of you know the story of these two women, that they had some amazing exchanges and probably a very wonderful and passionate love affair. And I did not know any of that when I found this letter. I just was like, wow, this is a letter. It doesn't say, it doesn't say anything. I mean, it's very like New England, it doesn't tell you any details at all. But you just feel in a similar way to Laura's poetry, actually, that you just feel the power of the word in the breaks and in the missing and in what isn't there and in the pauses. And one of the lines of the letter that I just was the first shocking thing to read for me was, "To miss you is loss." Okay? What did you remember?
To miss you, Sue, is power.
There you go. There you
The
go.
stimulus
She always
of
remembers.
loss makes
Yeah.
most possession mean. Indemnity for loneliness that such a bliss has been.
You're so amazing. You have like this incredible mind. You always remember. I know, but you always remember. Anyway, so that's it, and we'd love to share it with you.
play that with you live. I've been playing with a recording of Suzanne when I do my own solo recitals, and it's such a touching piece. It's such a beautiful setting of that poem, and indemnity for loneliness that such a bliss has been. That is the piece. Thank you. So before we do our little Q&A, we hope you have questions. We have questions for you. We thought that we would invite you to do a little performance with us. So one of the mentors of International Contemporary Ensemble is the late, great Pauline Oliveros. Any Pauline Oliveros fans? Pauline was actually the first composer to write a piece for our ensemble in the year 2000. When we were little students at Oberlin Conservatory. She's the first person that took a chance on us. She was also the first person to join our board before we even knew what a board was. She said, yes, I want to support this vision and this cause and all of you. She has been a mother and grandmother figure for so many musicians, tens of thousands of musicians, that she's directly influenced and an innumerable just universe of many generations of musicians beyond those that were fortunate enough to actually have FaceTime with her. So one of the things that she did with us was this piece called Sounds from Childhood. And it consists of, the score itself is a kind of poem, and it consists of a series of instructions that are more like invitations, that go like this: Sounds from Childhood. Everyone remembered a time when they were young, when they liked to make sounds. Usually sounds that adults would admonish you for making. So in the next few moments, think of 3 to 5 of these sounds. And what we're going to do is take a nice deep breath in, and on the exhale, you're going to make 3 to 5 of these sounds, either with someone else's sound, in anticipation of someone else's sound, or independently, alone. And we'll feel it when the piece is over. It's usually quite short. I suggest that you close your eyes, and why don't you come and join me up here. We're not performing, we're with each other, so we'll just sit here. So 3 to 5 sounds, think about your sounds. She's always very specific. It's not 7 sounds. It's not 2 sounds. It's not 100 sounds. It's not somebody else's sound. You can't take somebody else's sound. 3 to 5 of your sounds from your memory, from your childhood. And we'll take a big breath in, and on the out breath, we will begin this piece. Are we ready? Pauline was the founder of the Deep Listening Institute, and deep listening she defined as 2 instructions, we also think of as invitations. The first is to listen to everything around you, and the second is to notice when you're not doing that. Wonderful, wonderful invitation for music and for life. So that was Pauline. I would love to introduce you to our fearless leader, the executive director of International Contemporary Ensemble, Rebecca Siegel, who's going to join us on stage.
Yes, it is working. So I'm going to stand for a second while you're all thinking about questions and introduce myself and also introduce the International Contemporary Ensemble a little bit. So I am Executive Director of the International Contemporary Ensemble. And if this is your first time learning about who we are or what we do, this is kind of the perfect window. And I'll tell you a little bit more about why in a second. But who we are is a collective of 35 musicians who play music written primarily by composers still living today. A lot of works from the recent decades and thinking about how new works can both move the music itself forward, move instrumentalists forward, and we can really move alongside composers and with composers to evolve what music can sound like today and tomorrow and into the future. So I would say today is kind of a great snapshot of that. You heard Claire, our fearless founder, talk a little bit about how Pieces grew 18 years ago with Pauline, and that sort of relationship and collaboration between instrumentalists and composers has really propelled us ever since. I liked your anecdote about Ravel, and what if the string quartet had not been a string quartet but been an onde from the start? And that's sort of the question I think we ask, is what if that sound in a composer's mind could be unleashed by an instrumentalist that very same day? Or what if that instrumentalist could find themselves unleashed and their instrument unleashed by reading the mind of a composer and working together? So in a lot of ways what you saw today and that fantastic debut of a new piece is exactly what we do on small scales and on large scales with composers like Suzanne at the Met Museum and her beautiful Dolce La Muerte, which is based on Michelangelo's Love Letters, and we premiered at the Met a few years ago, and you should all listen to online when you go home today because it's beautiful, and we just released the album in December. So that's a snapshot of what we do, yes. That's a snapshot of what we do and the window that you got in today. And from there, I think I would love to have any questions. The way we'll have it work is if you have a question, you'll say it here. I'll say it back into the microphone so that anyone listening at home can also hear it, and then I'll pass the mic to these folks so that you can have your question answered. Yeah?
I'm just curious to learn more about the onde. I could see you doing it, but I have no idea what it looks like. Yeah.
The question is, tell me more about the onde.
Yeah. I had a plan for this. My original plan was... thanks. My original plan was to not show any stress in my voice as I moved this delicate fragment over to turn my back to you. Was to play the last piece with my back to you, since we would have been friends by then, and it would have been awkward if I had done that in the beginning. But if you would like, I can play a little for you in this way, so that you don't need to care about me, but you can see what I'm doing. Yeah? So I'll give you a little tour, real quick. But I need to give this to somebody like you. Triangle wave, sine wave, right? And they're oscillators, and they combine to make different weirder sounds. And the instrument has its own spring reverb, so if I accidentally knocked it over, it would have been like wah 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 wah. And which, I mean, not that I've ever done that, but. And And so sometimes I take away the dry speaker and I only play the wet speaker, so that gives the sound kind of this more diffuse, kind of more otherworldly sound, because even kind of concrete sound sounds pretty otherworldly. So there are a bunch of different color changes I can make while I play. So I'm going to start by just playing the straight onde sound. Onde, zero, it just says an O on the switch, and it just is the wave sound. So it makes it sound like there's a note, so I do things like, yeah, and I can play down to like 8th tones. Yeah, those are like my little tricks. And then you heard me play the Bach where I played all the keys. Right here, and this means everything is a set of magnets, so nothing is touching itself. And one of my students pointed out, it was something he said was that really freaked him out about the whole thing, was that it was a frictionless instrument. There's no air against something, there's no bow against anything. Everything is hovering, which is really problematic when you're in a taxi cab and it hits a black hole and everything breaks. But so when I play a note, the sound is coming out of my left hand, not my right hand. This is like the bow hand, and this is the left hand, as if it were a string. And so I can play very sensitively. And I can play like a vibrato, like a string player too. Notice that? Did I hit that? And I can also do like, funnier things. And when it sounds like I'm playing one note, like I did in Laura's piece, I do a little tremolo thing, and I play with colors, and in the piece I wrote for Claire, this sound is something I like, and this is where I play with both the faders, the wet speaker, and the tremolo. So, those are some examples.
Yes.
I just wanted to congratulate Claire. She took the flute choices I never even imagined.
That was a congratulations to Claire. She's good.
Well, it's inspiring to be next to this otherworldly instrument and to be sandwiched, between Suzanne's sounds and imagination world and the words of Laura. It's possible not to be inspired. It's a pretty good sandwich.
Yes.
Yes. What is the difference between the Owen Martineau, the theremin, and Moog?
Okay.
The question was the difference between Owen Martineau, theremin, and Moog.
The important detail is the onde is the best. And an ondiste does not like to be asked if she plays the theremin too. If you ever meet another ondiste, which is unlikely, but so the theremin and the onde kind of come out of the same mother. They both use a sine wave, a pure sine tone, but the theremin uses a different interface completely, right? You move through space, and it's the calculation of the distances that produce pitch. Whereas the onde, it's really an interface difference. The onde's interface, although it's also a pure sine wave as its basic sound, the goal of the engineer was to create an interface that resembled what the subtleties that are possible on a string instrument, basically. So that's the main difference. And then the Moog is a synthesizer, so the Moog is the child of the onde and the theremin.
Are you familiar with the composer Tristan Poisson, who was a Frenchman who studied with Messiaen?
Oh no. is a composer who writes for the Ondes a lot. He's still living.
He was in Atlanta in the 80s.
Wow.
And he did a piece for the centennial of the Louisiana Purchase for unmarked voice and orchestra.
Fantastic.
I'm gonna have to
Well,
learn
that's some
that.
homework to do.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've got some plans for the weekend. Thank you.
Yes?
What about replacement parts? Are they difficult?
The question was about replacement parts for the Owen Martineau.
Oh my lord. Yeah, it's not easy. They are not found at Radio Shack, although some things are. Yeah, I have to send back parts to France to the electrical engineer that built this for me, who luckily is very responsive. I've had a lot of Skype meetings with him and his assistant where I show them what's wrong and he tells me what to do. Yeah, it's tricky. I'm trying to get a second one so that I don't have a heart attack. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm working on it. It's not easy.
So this is sort of an insider question. Rebecca, could you talk a little bit about some of the other programs that ICE does besides play music? Because I know you do a lot of community work and other kinds of things.
So the question was, can I be you? What other types of projects does ICE do? More than just playing new music? Because Rebecca, you do a lot of things beyond that.
Yeah, so around the International Contemporary Ensemble, we have a lot of words that involve the acronym ICE. So we have INTICE, which is work that we do with young musicians. It's actually how I first came to know the International Contemporary Ensemble. I was working out in Los Angeles with a group of young musicians called Youth Orchestra LA, who were learning in an orchestra, and International Contemporary Ensemble musicians came and sort of opened their minds to different ways of playing. A lot of the stuff you saw on stage today, imagine that put in the hands of young musicians who are great at reading the notes on the page but have never thought, how can I make sounds alongside my friends? How could we tell our stories through our music, through things that aren't just rooted in the notes we're reading? So that made me want to be where I am now, and boy am I glad. But that is one of the things that we do, is work with young musicians there. Also up in Banff at Ensemble Evolution, where we're going to be in a few months. Working with young professionals, people who are coming out of conservatory or other programs and really wanting to figure out how to become the kind of successful performing musicians that a lot of our musicians are today. Thinking about that as our responsibility to help bridge, not just play music on premier stages, but think about how do we really help tomorrow's professionals get there. So that's sort of one piece, another piece of what we do. What am I missing?
You covered a lot.
I did cover some ground there, yeah. Thank you. What's that?
Open ICE?
Oh, Open ICE, absolutely. Thank you, Arlene. Open ICE is our initiative to make cost not a barrier to the music that we play. So they're free concerts and workshops, opportunity for us to engage with an audience and have the audience actually engage with the music that we're playing. So we have this fantastic musician in the ensemble, Levy, who actually builds electronic instruments. And one of the things he's done for Open ICE is do workshops where people can come in and build electronic instruments with him, and then hear in a concert those instruments performed, or then in other settings with work from composers. But Open ICE is our way of saying we want people to be able to come, experience our music, be a part of our community, and we know that cost can often be a barrier to that in the music world. So we're trying to break that down wherever we can, whether it's with composers, musicians, or audiences.
We want to also add that all of the Open ICE concerts and a growing number of the ensemble's other concerts, the group does about 165 live performances a year around the world, are all available on another platform using that acronym called Digitize. And it's a streaming video venue, essentially, that further opens up the archive of what the ensemble has done and is in the process of building. So that barrier to entry is just, we don't even pay attention to it. It's available for everybody.
And a way that we try to do it for composers too is something called ICE Commons. So for composers, often there are limitations on being connected with other musicians who can play their work, or other composers who can hear and develop their work with them. There are all of these barriers to really forming a community of creators and performers of music, but we're hoping that by using technology better, we can break some of that down. So Ice Commons is a place where composers can submit their work, and in an open database that people can go on and find out, oh, there's this piece written for flute, bassoon, Owen Martineau, and tuba? That's what my ensemble is. Great, let's find this guy.
You forgot that you amplified cactuses.
Sure. But that, I'm gonna play. Yes. Oh. Yes. Down in front. Website. www.iceorg.org. So that's www once, ice once, org twice. Yeah.
There's another question back there.
First, I would like to just say I'm extraordinarily appreciative of the combination in this trio and this performance. And I feel, just I need to say that. I wanted to ask Claire if you have so much kinesthetic nature about you and movement seems to be a big part of your performance, and I'm curious how, if it has added to what you bring to your instrument and your vocal, or if it hasn't.
Will you repeat that?
I think we all got that. Yeah. You know, it's an interesting question. I don't think at all about the way that I'm moving. I think about the music, and spent a lot of time with different teachers and in conservatory working very, very hard to not move my face, my body. And a teacher once would put tape on my forehead so I wouldn't be. And I really tried. I genuinely tried to stay still, and it wasn't possible. And so I gave up trying, and I've had a lot more fun since then.
I felt that because the constraints of, I don't know all the musical constraints, but I mean, I picture the rigidity of the teacher telling you to sit in that chair and not move, somewhat the same as the rigidity within ballet at times. And I didn't see it in you at all. And it was such a pleasure.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm a small person too, and the flute takes, it looks like it's this little tiny thing, and it's easy to play, but it actually takes an enormous amount of air and energy. I mean, I think about, and not just the large flutes, but the small flutes too. I think about it like an ocean of energy going through the bottoms of my feet and up through my body and through the instrument. And as a small person, I think that everything that we have available to us needs to be used. It's actually quite easy for a large man, which is the flute playing tradition of the French school. Large, very large French men with large chest cavities. It's actually very easy for them to do all the things that they need to do on the flute by just standing there because there's a lot of room. But as a small person, I need to use everything I have. And it's the bottoms of my toes and my feet and the tips of my hair and anything that I need to be able to realize the vision of a brilliant composer like Suzanne, or to respond to the amazing poetry of Laura. I mean, I think of the body as an instrument in that way too.
How much of the collaborative pieces are actually rehearsed, or is there the element of improvisation as you play to make it different every time you play, or is it here's where we're gonna rehearse and just do it over and over? Do you leave room for that? I would assume so because you're so
Well, it's different for different pieces. Suzanne's piece that we played at the end, the Emily Dickinson-inspired piece, Stimulus of Loss, is through composed. Every single one of my gestures is precisely notated. Maybe she'll let you glance at the score afterwards. Her writing is so beautiful on the page. Of course, it's a live performance, and we're humans, and somebody has different timing than they did the day before, and so there's play there. That's a very different process than the one that you observed that was the first for us, responding to Laura's poem. Suzanne had sketched out a kind of map of what we were doing in a few pitch centers, but basically we intentionally left that first rehearsal to our performance today. And sometimes I do performances that are entirely improvised, so it really is, it's on a very wide scale.
Something that I think about with that question a lot is that when we really learn music, we try to make it sound like it's improvised. And when we're improvising music, we try to make it sound like we've thought about it for a really long time, you know? And it's amazing, you know, like actors do it too. They go on stage and they talk to you as if they're just making up these words, right? But they had to learn them that deeply in order to sound like they made them up. So I really enjoy that place of trying to work really deeply and profoundly in both of those spaces.
I have a question for Laura. How do you see your work as a poet, as a writer, being influenced by musicians who in turn are interpreting your work? How do you see that either you have an opportunity to write of that experience, in that experience, and how has contemporary music, how do you see that taking a place in influencing your style?
Oh, thank you. Well, the first thing I should say is I just realized today that this is the 10-year anniversary of my meeting the Icicles. Because the composer Jay Eckhart sent the last poem from the book I was reading from as a piece of music. And I went to Helsinki to see it performed, and there they were. And since that time, they've been influencing me in so many ways. Can I just say, the poetry community is, as you might guess, well, as is, I imagine, contemporary music, large swaths of it are terribly conservative poetry as well. So to be able to be around people who are pressing into the idea of what music might be, drawing on energies from young people, contemporary people, people from all kinds of backgrounds, is incredibly important to keeping my work on this ever-opening strand, I would say, just widening the possibilities. And one of the great things, it's actually up, you can look at it online. Nathan Davis, who's one of the great members of ICE, a percussionist, he did a piece with me. He asked me to write for it, so I had the wonderful experience of getting to write for the music rather than writing something handed to someone. Although today just blew me away, so I'm like, oh God. Yeah, you're a genius. Yeah, but it's called Ask, and it was performed by Third Coast Percussion at Notre Dame, and they are super hot, and that choir's amazing. It's a piece for choir and percussion, and to go into that changed me as a writer also. As then, of course, being asked by an artist to collaborate changed it as well. What I will say about music is there's a wonderful way in which a kind of whole life's worth of emotion is added to the work, which I really, really, really love. Does that answer?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Streaming. With this www address, is that for streaming?
As far as concert streaming?
You said that today's.
Oh, today's event has been streamed on a YouTube link through the Hermitage Artist Retreat. Often we do put our concerts online in Digitize, which is a database, it's a website where we upload video. Also, sometimes if you follow us on Facebook or Twitter, you might find that some of the things that we do are live streamed, and so you'll get an alert on Facebook if we're doing that.
I'm into streaming now, and I'm trying to get something I can put in my collection and I can get a hold of it.
If you figure it out, let me know, because I'm still learning.
You'd be surprised what I'm able to do. I surprise myself what I'm able to do.
All right, let's talk afterwards.
Was it good?
Great, that seems like a wonderful place to wrap it up. Thank you all so much for your questions.